The workplace has changed forever with social movements like Black Lives Matter, Me Too, and Stop Asian Hate. We are now more aware of difference and inequality in the workplace. And the most important thing is many organisations are doing something about it. Are we now finally seeing diversity, equity and inclusion being more than just good intentions, but real lasting change? Let's find out. Welcome to Talking HR Trends with Natal and Tom. I'm Natal Dank.
And I'm Tom Haak.
And we explore the latest hot topics and business challenges impacting the people side of organisations. Stick around to the end for our practical top tip. And if you find this discussion valuable, please subscribe. Okay, Tom, so diversity, equity and inclusion, big topic. And what I think's interesting is over the last few years, our understanding of what this topic means and the terms involved has really kind of grown in sophistication. However, there are a lot more terms that people are using. So now people talk about diversity, equity and inclusion when they talk about their strategy. And while this is there's sort of new understanding, there's also, I think, a lot of confusion about the terms that are being used. Can you help people understand what these terms mean and why they're important?
Diversity is just a description of, you could say, a population. What do we find if we look at the workers in an organization? What does it look like in terms of men, women, in terms of color, in terms of background? And so there's a lot of variables, and diversity is describing what you see.
Yeah.
Or where you want to go. Inclusion is more the feeling of the people in that organization. Do they feel at home? Do they feel included in that organization? Do they feel valued? So that's in the end, it's a measurement of the feeling of people and the experience of people in that organization.
Yeah, definitely.
Equity is more about, do people get the same opportunities? Are they offered the same opportunities?
Yeah.
And how does that work? So where diversity and inclusion are in the end kind of lag indicators again, descriptors that you have to measure, equity is a process.
Yeah. Yeah.
You can do things to make sure that people get the same opportunities.
I agree with you. Diversity and inclusion is more these outcomes.
Yeah.
And I've heard people say that, diversity is sort of getting into the office, so the representation of people, but inclusion and belonging is about having a voice, once you're in the office. But definitely equity is then giving people the same opportunities and recognizing that there's blockers to begin with for some people in our office. Yeah. Quite recently, I was fortunate enough to help facilitate a diversity, equity and inclusion strategy discussion. And I was just so inspired by the conversations that senior leaders were having in this organization. And it made me think, finally, are we going to see real change? And actually, is it going to come from business? Because this makes good business sense rather than just sort of government policy. So what's going on here? Are we seeing diversity, equity, inclusion being more than just window dressing, Tom?
We talk too much about diversity, inclusion, belonging as a goal in itself.
Yeah.
And not why do we want this and what are the benefits of this? And that's where businesses and organizations are starting to realize it's not just a goal in itself, but there are a lot of benefits to it. For example, around innovation, a diverse and a mixed group of people who feel a sense of belonging, they get to more creative solutions in organization, and organizations can benefit from that. So I think that's part of the learning curve. It's not a goal in itself. Yes, we have to focus on what is it going to bring us. And I think it's still early days.
Yeah.
It's still super early days. But I also sense what you were saying. We're getting there. But we can be a lot more aggressive, in my view.
Yeah, we can. I think we can be a lot more ambitious, can't we?
Yeah.
And really go for it, exactly. On that point, that diversity equals good business, McKinsey recently declared that diversity wins, that there is now data to show that more diverse companies outperform less diverse companies. So, in this sense, it does make good sense around just on a business economic point of view. Also, there's a lot of data to show that the future talent market is a more diverse market, and you need to be ready for that. You need to be ready to attract lots of diverse talent. So, in this sense, there's kind of I feel like you've got to keep going forward. And maybe this is a real driver for organizations. So if people are in this position, they realize, yep, now is the time to take real action about diversity, equity, inclusion. What would you see as the top 3 things that a HR leader or team should do?
And one we already discussed is bring it close to the organization. So don't make it an HR subject. Don't make it a subject of the chief diversity officer. You see some organizations, okay, we've done our job because we have appointed a CDO. Keep it close to the organization, not only the top, but the people who are running the organization. So that's one, I think.
Yeah.
Second is, and I always say that, but it's use people analytics. Measure what's going on, especially when we talk about equity. There's a lot of things you can do when you look at your processes.
Yes, definitely.
What is happening in recruitment? Who is interviewing whom? What is the content of the interview process? At which universities are we recruiting? What are the selection criteria where we are looking for? So you can find a lot of ammunition if you measure rigorously around the subject of diversity, inclusion, and belonging. Last week, I heard an organization that has installed an inclusion index, I think they call it.
Yeah.
So what is the inclusion index in the different parts of the organization?
Yeah.
Not only how many people of color or females in senior positions, but what is the inclusion index in the different parts of the organization?
And also the data can unearth the experience that people are having. So something that I've learnt recently is that you could do a sort of a feedback survey, pulse survey.
Yeah.
How do people feel about belonging or, equal opportunities? But you then need to go and interrogate the data, because it might be that the majority of people think it's fine, but the people that don't have as much opportunity, they're the ones that are actually saying it's not fine. So you need to go and unearth what's sitting behind the data a bit more.
Yeah. Not just the averages.
Not just the averages and the top line figures. Yeah, definitely. Yeah.
Number 3 on my list is set targets and be tough on those targets. And don't just say, it's a process and we're moving in the right direction. And but in the end, it's still about the right person, the best person. You hear a lot of excuses. I think targets help to keep it moving and to really have breakthroughs. And the last one, so I have 4 apologies. I think we should be tough when it comes to unwanted behavior. And there are many environments, and you and I have been in it, where it's subtle, but there are jokes, there are remarks, there are all kinds of things that you don't want. And if you notice that type of behavior as HR, as managers, or whomever, it should be addressed, and there should be kind of zero tolerance.
Yeah, no, we need to call it out, definitely, and we need to have conversations about it. Exactly.
Yeah.
This goes back to when we discussed ethical leadership. If you see something, a bad joke, if you see someone saying something inappropriately, you must speak up, because if you don't, the person that is the victim is in a less of a position to be able to. So we've got to actually stand up and be an ally, definitely. Yeah.
And it's not easy.
It's not easy.
That's not easy.
No, exactly. But actually having more conversations around that. So if you have some senior leaders standing up and talking about a story where they had to call out bad behavior, that really sets the scene, doesn't it? So how do you get people to talk about this issue a lot more? I think is really important as well. Thanks for your time today, Tom. We've only scratched the surface when it comes to diversity, equity, inclusion, but I think a really important discussion and an important starting point. And that's where we'd like to take the practical top tip today. So where do you start with this topic? Well, a great way is to actually think about what the words diversity, equity, and inclusion mean to you. So take 5 minutes out now, write each one down, and actually think about their meaning. Well, how do you see that represented in your workplace? What does it mean to you? And then step back and have a look. Is there overlap? Are there differences? And if you could do one thing in each area, what would that be? Just by starting to understand these terms and talking more about each one, you can really make a big impact in your organization. Thanks for your time today. This is Talking HR Trends with Natal and Tom. If you like this discussion, please subscribe. Thank you.